I was born in a land where silence carried secrets, and the river spoke louder than the people who lived beside it. From my earliest memories, I felt a pull toward the water, as if the waves were whispering names only I could hear. One evening, when the sun was bleeding its last colors across the horizon, I walked alone along the riverbank. My feet touched the wet sand, and the current seemed to guide me toward something unknown. That is when I saw them, strangers, whose eyes held an ancient fire. Men who belonged to the people of the book. The Jews, carrying scrolls wrapped in shadows. They called me closer, not with words, but with gestures that reached into my soul. Their presence was both frightening and fascinating, as though they carried the weight of centuries in their breath. One of them spoke, his voice calm yet sharp, telling me that I was chosen, that I had been waiting for this moment since before I was born. They promised to teach me the forbidden arts, the language of the unseen, the craft that could command both light and darkness, and though I trembled, I could not resist. Something deep within me longed for power, for knowledge beyond the boundaries of ordinary life. Night after night, I returned to them, learning words that cracked the silence of the sky, signs that bent the will of nature, spells that made the river shiver at my command. The world around me became fragile, like clay waiting for my touch to shape it. With every lesson, I felt the weight of my humanity slipping away, and the echo of something greater taking its place. Yet with that power came a hunger that burned deeper than my veins could hold. One day, they set me a trial. They told me to cross into a distant village, a place in Iran where the houses were built close, like hearts beating together. They said if I truly wished to embrace the path, I must test the strength of my gift. And so, trembling yet determined, I walked into that village beneath the cover of night. I saw families laughing, children chasing each other in the dusty streets, mothers preparing bread in the warmth of their kitchens. For a moment, I hesitated, for their joy felt too human to destroy. But then I remembered the promise of the river, the promise of the teachers who gave me their trust. I spoke the words I had been taught. The ground shook, the sky darkened, a wind sharper than blades cut through the fields. Within moments, the laughter turned to screams, the fires of kitchens turned to wild flames consuming roofs. The river of life turned into a flood of despair, and I stood in the center of that storm, both terrified and alive, watching as the village crumbled beneath the curse of my own voice. It was in that moment I realized the truth. I was no longer a girl beside a river. I was the storm itself. When the cries of that night finally faded, an empty silence settled over me. The village lay in ashes, a memory of laughter burned into dust. And yet the power in my veins pulsed like fire that would not die. I tried to tell myself I had done what was asked of me, that it was the path of destiny, but the truth gnawed at me like a hidden wound. Every scream still echoed in my ears, and when I closed my eyes, I saw children reaching for hands that could no longer save them. I thought power would make me invincible, but instead it made me hollow. I began to wander alone through the ruins, my feet sinking into blackened earth where bread ovens once warmed families. I touched walls that had collapsed, and the ashes clung to my skin like accusations. And then, among the shadows, I saw him, a man unlike the teachers who had trained me. His eyes were not filled with fire, but with sorrow. And yet in that sorrow there was strength. He stood at the edge of the broken square, holding the hand of a small child. His own village shattered around him. He did not scream, he did not curse. He only looked at me as though he could see through the layers of my soul. I should have turned away. I should have vanished into the night as the others had taught me. But his gaze rooted me to the ground. I felt something stir inside me. Something the river had whispered of long ago, but I had never understood. Fragile yet fierce, a thread binding me to a stranger. He spoke only one sentence, quiet yet unshakable. If you can destroy, then you can also heal. Those words pierced me deeper than any spell. For the first time, I wondered if the power I had been given was not only for ruin but also for renewal. Days passed, and I found myself returning to that ruined village, watching him as he rebuilt small pieces of what remained. He gathered the survivors, sharing what little food they could salvage. He taught the children to smile again, even among the broken stones. And I, once the bringer of the storm, found myself standing silently at the edge, longing to step into their circle. My heart, once drunk on shadows, began to ache with a different hunger, the hunger to mend, to belong, to be forgiven. The teachers by the river warned me never to look back, never to feel weakness. But every night, his words haunted me. If you can destroy, then you can also heal. They became a melody I could not silence, a prayer hidden beneath my breath. Slowly, I began to imagine a new path, not as a sorceress of darkness, but as a woman who could turn the same curse into blessing. The thought terrified me, for it meant betraying those who had given me their secrets. Yet my heart was no longer bound to them. It was bound to him, to the village, to the hope that perhaps love was stronger than any spell ever whispered beneath the stars. The nights grew heavier as I wrestled with my conscience. I had walked the path of shadows, yet now a new light burned within me, urging me to choose differently. Each time I looked at him, working among the ruins with bare hands, I felt my heart breaking and rebuilding all at once. His strength was not in magic or power, but in the kindness he gave so freely. One evening, I returned to the river where it all began. The teachers were waiting, their eyes cold, their voices sharp. They reminded me that I had been chosen to serve darkness, not to wander after human weakness, but I dared to speak my heart. I told them that destruction was not the end I desired, that I wished to mend what I had broken. Their laughter echoed like knives, warning me that betrayal would cost me more than life it would cost my soul. Still, I turned away from them, trembling but resolute. The river that once whispered commands now seemed to carry another song, softer, forgiving. I returned to the village and stood before the man. My voice shook as I confessed my crime, admitting that I was the one who had cursed his people. I expected rage, hatred, perhaps even death. But instead, he looked at me with silence, and then, slowly, he nodded. "You cannot undo the past," he said, "but you can choose what the future will remember." His words struck me like thunder. I knew then that my journey had not ended with destruction. It had only begun with healing. The first attempt to heal was the hardest. I stood among the ruins, my hands trembling as I recalled the same words I once used for ruin. Only now, I changed them, twisted their meaning, toward life, toward renewal. The ground shivered beneath me, but instead of splitting open, small flowers broke through the ashes. The villagers gasped, their fear turning slowly into wonder. For the first time, I saw hope in their eyes, and it was directed at me. I worked day after day, weaving spells not of fire but of water, not of darkness but of dawn. Broken wells filled again, crops sprouted in dry fields, and the air no longer carried the stench of smoke, but the fragrance of bread baking in rebuilt ovens. The children, once afraid of my shadow, now ran to me with laughter, their tiny hands pulling me into their games. And yet, the struggle was not gone. At night I still heard the voices of the teachers, their threats crawling through my dreams. They wanted me back, wanted me to remain their servant of destruction. But love gave me courage, and his faith gave me strength. He stood beside me every day, teaching me that forgiveness was not a gift given once, but a choice made again and again. I began to believe that perhaps my curse had always carried its opposite within it, that the same power that once shattered lives could also knit them whole, and in that belief, I found freedom. The village no longer looked like the grave I had created. Instead, it breathed again, filled with songs, laughter, and the rhythm of daily life. Yet inside me, the true transformation was greater than any spell. I was no longer the girl who had stood by the river, craving power. I was a woman who had learned the weight of love, forgiveness, and responsibility. The man who had first seen through my darkness became my anchor. His quiet strength reminded me that healing was not instant. It was a journey taken step by step, wound by wound. Together, we rebuilt not just walls but trust, not just homes but hearts. And every time I saw the villagers smile, I felt a piece of my own soul restored. Still, the river calls to me sometimes, carrying faint whispers of my old masters. They promise power without limit, urging me to return, but I no longer fear them. Their voices are nothing compared to the voices of children laughing in the streets, or the sound of bread breaking at family tables, or the steady heartbeat of the man I love. I know now that true power is not in destruction, but in creation. Not in fear, but in hope. Not in curses, but in blessings. And though my past will always remain a scar, it is also a reminder of what I must never become again. This is my story, born from darkness, shaped by love, and carried forward by the choice to heal. And if destiny is still listening, let it remember me not as the storm that once destroyed, but as the gentle rain that gave life again.